ask questions as
Except
much as you can.
There's turtles. Turtles.
Except there's but at least he asked the
Yeah,
question.
yeah.
Otherwise, he would have probably died not knowing. And I think that is actually scarier than asking the question.
Off-Gassing, a scuba podcast with host Nick Hogel. As we become divers, most of us are reminded of how important the oceans are, the need to protect and care for all the wonderful life within it, not only for us, but for future generations. In this episode, I speak with Lou, a diver from the southern coast of South Africa with a background deep in conservation. I met Lou as he was starting his role as operations manager at Ceningan Resort. He takes me through his journey to exotic places, his work in conservation, making the most out of opportunities, and gives some advice for divers looking at getting into ocean conservation. Enjoy.
Llewellyn Tossel.
You go by Lou, right?
By Lou.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for being a part of the podcast today. My first question I always like to ask is, tell me how you got into scuba diving, why you got into scuba diving, that first breath underwater, that first experience. Was it love at first breath, or was it, I don't really know if I like this, but I'll continue on?
Hundreds. And first of all, thank you for having me on your podcast. It's actually my first time on a podcast. So something new for me. But, I was very privileged growing up in a very small coastal town. The ocean has always been a big part of my upbringing, big part of our culture. We made our friends in the ocean.
Where are you from again?
South Africa's southern coast, a small town called George, wilderness area.
Okay.
So great mountain ranges, and pretty much spent most of our time either surfing or hiking. So in that sense, nature was always a part of our upbringing. From growing up surfing and playing in tidal pools, you start asking questions that most adults can't really answer. The more you learn, the more questions you have. And I think the logical next step for me was to get into something more ocean related. I left after school to the Congo for about 2 years, which was a landlocked country. That was the first experience that actually, in a sense, made me realize what the ocean meant to me. Being in a rainforest, can't even see ocean, smell ocean. It's a completely different environment. So that just rekindled or made me realize how I actually in a way took the ocean for granted. Leaving it all behind, thinking it's going to be this incredible adventure, which it was. I realized the ocean is the place for me. I actually got back in South Africa after the 2 years in the Congo, and me and my mate that we grew up together, surfed together, free dive together. He's like, dude, let's go do a diving course. And we decided Cape Town, out of all places, super cold water, and we were just keen to get into diving,
Yeah.
We did an open water course and pretty much got bitten by the bug right there. We did open water and went straight through, literally got ourselves an apartment and just lived in Cape Town for like a year and a half.
That's awesome. Tell me about the diving in Cape Town.
So Cape Town is a very unique environment. I think when a lot of people think about diving, they think of, tropical coastlines, white beaches, palm trees, and things like that. Where Cape Town is kelp forests, cold water, sea otters, penguins, sharks, murky water, which I really enjoyed. I think, it made me a strong, confident diver, diving in those conditions. Most of the days it's, pretty big swell, big surge, things like that. But really, really unique environment that I'd really recommend for people to do, because everyone thinks it's just cold and murky, but there's absolutely incredible stuff to witness, especially megafauna and things like this. So yeah, definitely anyone that's interested in seeing amazing stuff, cold water is not just miserable. Yeah.
So did you go from open water right through instructor, or how was that progression?
So I did my open water. There was a little gap in between, and then basically signed up for an internship. So basically lived in a dive center for more than a year.
In Cape Town?
In Cape Town. So yeah, fully committed to it. You know, as I said, after that first dive, I knew this is pretty much going to be it for the rest of my life. Yeah.
So when you finished the internship, what happened after that? Did you find another job, or was it kind of like not really searching, something fell in your lap? Like, talk about, because you definitely have been quite a few places. So how did you end up getting out of Cape Town?
So ironically, as I mentioned before, I went to the Congo for almost 2 years. I went back to the Congo after my... Because, of course, you know, I was a new diving instructor. Plane tickets aren't cheap. Diving equipment's not cheap.
Yeah.
So, you know, I had that thing to fall back on to go make a little bit of money to set myself up for my diving career.
What were you doing in the Congo?
So we were doing environmental solutions.
Okay.
So in a nutshell, preventing mining pollution from reaching freshwater sources and stuff like that.
How did you decide to get into that?
I had no idea what I wanted to do after school. And yeah, you know, pretty lucky, I guess. Always throwing myself into the deep end and seeing what happens, you know. So this opportunity came across my path, and I decided, you know, what's the worst that could happen?
Okay.
Yeah. And then, yeah, basically progressed. After that, went to Madagascar for also close to 2 years, which was spectacular. In a sense, I want to say it was a mix of Congo and diving, you know,
Really? Okay.
because it's pretty remote. We lived on an island with no electricity, no cars, no roads, no shops. It was just jungle and diving.
How did that come about?
So again, it was, you know, it was provided by the universe.
Oh, okay.
It was something that came across my path. And when I did apply for this job, I was actually, you know, maybe I'm a little bit underqualified. I don't have all that diving experience. I was given the opportunity and made the most of that. Yeah.
That sounds like a great story. So tell me a little bit more about Madagascar, because I don't actually right now I can't recall how the diving is or what goes on there. So you were working on a project, I'm assuming, like a conservation project?
Conservation. So, you know, it wasn't as glamorous as people think. It is not fun dives. All diving is fun though, but this was a little bit more tedious, long, you know, slow dives.
What were you doing?
So we were doing basically focusing on reef monitoring. Later on, we started implementing a lot more artificial reef projects. We had a lot of partnerships around there as well. So, but mostly reef surveying, biomass surveys, species surveys, and things like this. So yeah, pretty much spending as much time as you can underwater with your amount of air you have and just getting as much data as you possibly can.
Who was like in charge of that project? Was it like a government funded thing?
So it's an NGO. It was founded by a South African guy. And yeah, so I was director of marine operations for this organization.
So I'm assuming, or I don't know, do people go there to fun dive or no?
Well, in Madagascar, yes. It's a very specific environment as well when it comes to like macro. There's not a lot of megafauna around. You do get whales coming through, whale sharks and things like this. Like humpbacks. There's actually a very big fin whale population there.
Okay.
That is also really, in a sense, understudied. It's not a lot we know about them. But I would say macro-wise, it's probably one of the best places that I've dived. You know, from the range of like seahorses, ghost pipefish, and, you know, nudies. Well, that will blow your mind. Yeah. So yeah, no, Madagascar is good. A lot of shallow dives though. Not a lot of current necessarily. And then yeah, unfortunately, if you look around the coastline of mainland Madagascar, there's a lot of like forest clearings. You know, it's a very densely populated like city or village, you know, so they need land for agriculture. This deforestation, you know, just allows sedimentation to completely destroy reefs. So that's something that we saw is pretty prevalent in those remote areas. Yeah.
And then after Madagascar?
After Madagascar, I went to Sri Lanka to visit a friend. This was end of 2019, beginning of 2020.
So pre-COVID, yeah.
Yeah, like leading into it. So yeah, beginning 2020, went to Sri Lanka to visit a friend. I was informed Sri Lanka will be closing their border on the 15th of March, if I'm not mistaken. I was like in 7 days at that time. I heard South Africa already closed their borders, so it was either getting a repatriation flight back to South Africa, which was pretty much at the bottom of my list. And then, staying and getting stuck in Sri Lanka with a lot of uncertainty. So I chose option C instead. Got a ticket to Fiji, made it a little bit more uncertain. And
How
basically,
did Fiji pop up?
it was like the first thing that was available. I've always wanted to go. Might as well go now.
Yeah.
Ended up in Fiji. They closed their border probably 5 or 6 days after I arrived, and pretty much got stuck there for 9 or 10 months.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Were you able to find work, or were you just kind of floating around?
So I met a coral biologist there, Victor Benito. You can go check up some of his work as well. He does a lot of coral restoration projects on the south coast of Viti Levu. He's from Canada, does absolutely incredible work. So he took me under his wing, in a sense. So yeah, I helped him out with a few projects down at his place, which is really cool. Kept me busy for a little while. After that, it turned more into a surfing and sailing lockdown for me. We were very privileged though, like in a sense, there wasn't really COVID. They closed their borders. It was normal living, no masks, no curfew.
Oh, okay.
So, having a beer on the beach while everyone's sitting at home, can't really say I felt what everyone felt. So, yeah, after Fiji, went back to South Africa for 2-3 months. Basically got kicked out of Fiji because I overstayed my visa with so long. But, couldn't do anything else.
Yeah.
Went back to South Africa, and after that, things were getting a slow open after COVID. Eventually found a job there as a resident conservationist on one of the islands in Maldives. Spent a full year there, pretty much more like an instructor role.
In the Maldives?
In the Maldives.
Okay.
Something that wasn't too keen about. Maldives is a topic for another podcast. That's a long story. But yeah, it was necessary. It's something that I always wanted to try. Maldives was good diving. But again, as I mentioned, that's a long story.
Yeah.
After Maldives, went back to Madagascar for 1 year. And, here we are today in Indonesia.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
If you don't mind, if you have the time, a little bit more about tell me a little bit more about the Maldives.
Let's say it's pretty split. If you ask people that has been in Maldives what their opinion is and what their experience was in Maldives, I think what your opinion will be is probably determined by the reason you went there. If you are going on your honeymoon, absolutely incredibly beautiful, white beaches, but living there, working there, you are more behind the scenes. You see what actually goes on. When it comes to things like conservation work, let's say for instance things like coral restoration, all these type of stuff, a lot of these resorts, they try and almost say, okay, well, we're running this big conservation project. But if you take it back to land, what are you actually doing to prevent those problems from occurring? Let's say, for instance, resorts trying to keep all their weeds and stuff at bay. Of course, they're spraying a lot of chemicals on their plants. They don't want birds, I don't know if I can say shitting.
Yeah, you're good. Yeah.
Shitting on the roofs. They try and exterminate birds. So all these things have a cascading effect on the immediate environment, like the immediate reef around the resorts. Building bungalows over reefs, preventing sunlight from reaching them. And then on the side trying to do coral restoration. So I think it's a little bit conflicting. But again, that's more behind the scenes. As I said, your opinion will be determined by the reason you were there.
Yeah, and actually, I had my first interview or my first episode it's a girl named Elsa. She actually works in Ahmed right now, and she had some kind of things to say about Maldives too, because she spent some time there. And I've heard even before her the kind of what you're saying. It's kind of just depends on the circumstances while you were there. If you were there on
100%.
vacation, probably had an amazing time. If you're working there, it might be slightly a little bit different.
Definitely, and I consider it a very artificial environment. For me, I like traveling places, experiencing, eating local food, getting to know the locals. That's why you go places.
Yeah.
That's to build who you are. Maldives, it's a little bit hard, because you're living in very almost like constructed environment. It's everything is very resorty, very urban. It's not an island that I consider like an island.
Okay.
It's let's compare it to a cruise ship. It's pretty much a cruise ship. So again, each to their own.
Yeah.
Some people absolutely love it, but I do think, if you do visit Maldives, in the back of your mind, always just be conscious of, maybe where you're going, what resort you're choosing, things like that, because, I think, funding these type of resorts, at the end of the day, you want to be environmentally conscious. So think about where your money goes.
Tell me a little bit about the diving in the Maldives.
Diving, again, there's some places that's absolutely mind-blowing. But then again, I think most of the best diving around Maldives is outside of the actual atolls. Most of them actually only reachable by liveaboards and things like this. So, you get sperm whales and, incredibly strong currents. So, you get big pelagic animals cruising by. They have in the south of Maldives, they do have the tiger sharks and the threshers. Again, if you are selective of where you go, you could actually have some incredible diving. But I think, the majority side, most of the diving is, pretty much wall dives that has been destroyed in the last 20 years. It is also not a place where I've really seen like strict policies being enforced. They have a lot of marine national parks. They have speed limits for boats. But then you'll see a whale shark, or you'll see 5 whale sharks. 3 of them have prop scars on them. A lot of mantis are just absolutely destroyed. So, Maldives is not a poor country. It's actually really, really rich. So, I think it could be done better considering, don't quote me on this, more than 90% of the country is water. So the economy basically relies on this. So, I would probably lean towards putting a little bit more funds into conserving that 90% of our country, if that was me. But again, that's veering off into politics and stuff like that, which
unfortunately it happens more than we'd like to admit.
Of course.
After Maldives, you said that's how you found your way to Indonesia? Or?
So after Maldives, actually went back to Madagascar.
Okay.
When their borders opened there. Started a few new cool projects there as well. I was focusing more on artificial reef stuff, which is a really big passion of mine. I just think there's so much that could be done. And it's pretty experimental, you can go everywhere in the world. Everyone does it differently, different methodologies. So, you play around and see what works, what doesn't work. Your specific environment, it's very specific to that. Something might work in a different place. Like for instance, what we did in Fiji didn't necessarily work in Madagascar. So again, you try and find these little tweaks to your project to make it very specific to your local environment. And then after that, made my way to Indonesia finally. Yeah.
So on the boat today, or it was either yesterday or today, you were telling me how when you're building these artificial reefs, you're getting into welding, and it's kind of a therapeutical thing for you.
For sure.
You want to talk about that a little bit?
So I think, you can deduce that down to, pretty much any art form. You don't need to necessarily draw well, but drawing for some people makes them feel calm. I think the actual reason why I find it therapeutic is, in a sense, you're just in your own world. No one really speaks to you when you weld, you can have your earphones in, you can... pretty quiet environment. Well, again, it turns into white noise. But yeah, it's just you in your own world, and you create the most ridiculous stuff. It's my last artificial reef I built weighed probably about 350 to 400 kilograms. That's almost 1,000 pounds. I'm not sure.
It's like 300 would be right around 900.
Yeah.
So you build it on land. How do you get it?
That's the tricky part. So you start constructing skeleton, and you play around with ideas, and then before you actually start adding the body, like the concrete and all that type of stuff, you move it as close as you can to the water and basically finish it on the beach. That was pretty tricky in Madagascar with like big tidal fluctuations, because again, you can't put concrete on a structure and it's already submerged after like an hour. So it's, again, you get so used to your environment, and, you see what works and doesn't work. But yeah, it was a life-size turtle, probably about 1.5 meters. So actually a little bit bigger than a fully grown green turtle. But yeah, I'll actually show you some pictures as well. Cool. And yeah, we actually transplanted, I think it was 12 coral fragments on it. So yeah, again, that was just before I left, so it'd be actually really cool to see how it's doing at the moment. Yeah.
Have you been getting updates from?
So I actually need to. It's only been about 2 months. Maybe give it a little bit more time. After like 5-6 months, you'll have a good idea if it's successful or not. As I mentioned earlier about sedimentation in Madagascar, that's a pretty big problem. What we do try and do is elevate solid substrate for, not only transplanting corals on there, but allowing coral larvae to actually like naturally recruit on these solid substrates. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you said that was just a couple months ago. So you are recently new back to Indonesia, because I'm assuming you'd been here before.
So been here actually about a year ago, my first time. Just as you know, my partner's Indonesian. She's always like talked up about it, and I was like, well, we need to go. And it has always been, one of those places like, I don't want to go now and spoil myself. I want to treat myself when I actually deserve it. And yeah, we came to Indonesia last year, did the whole Komodo thing. It was actually mind-blowing.
So it lived up to the hype?
It did. Yeah. It did. And I'm a coral person, you can show me mantis and stuff, it's all good. But, a healthy reef, I'd sit and drool about that for a few days. So that was absolutely incredible. We did a little trip through Indonesia, and you pretty much fell in love with it straight away. And basically we left back to Madagascar, I went back to South Africa. That's before we went to Madagascar. And, I told Keisha, my partner, whenever we get a good opportunity in Indonesia, that's something we do need to take. It came quicker than anticipated, but can't be happier than being here. It's literally not even been a month, and I see myself staying here for the foreseeable future.
Oh, it's a very beautiful place. First time I came here, I fell in love and was like, how can I stay longer?
Actually, one of my childhood friends, it was like 4 days after we arrived here. I think it was like, the 1st of July. We drove down. I didn't even know he was here. I just like bumped into him and we ended up hanging out a bit. And he actually, funnily enough, just before he left, he's like, so, Lou, how much will it be to do my dive master, my dive instructor? I think I want to stay here. It's like, it's... Again, it's not for everyone, but you being an instructor, being in like the diving environment, I completely, understand that.
It's easily you're hooked.
Yeah, for sure. Like, it's consistent quality diving. You can't ask more. There's a lot of places in the world where, they have 2 really good sites, but the rest is, let's say, average, So here it's just absolutely every day is incredible. Yeah.
So I am... hypothetical, I'm a newer diver and I would like to get into conservation.
Yeah.
What can I expect? What should I look out for? What should I avoid? Because I know that there is, I haven't really seen, I've just heard, there might be some projects out there that aren't, really what they're trying to be, just kind of, I think you're kind of speaking that.
Instagram conservation.
Yeah. So, what would be a good path that you can take as a new diver wanting to look down that road?
The best place to start in this scenario will be getting dives under your belt. Just become a confident diver, because when you start going into conservation, you don't necessarily learn to dive well. It's you focus so much on like what you're doing. It's not like training buoyancy and stuff like that. You want to go into conservation, feeling incredibly confident underwater, because it's a very solo journey. When you do scientific diving, there's no buddy teams. And, you're on your own, you're doing your own thing. So I think, that's a good place to start. It's just becoming a good diver. Dive as much as you can. And even that will already give you like a base knowledge of, what goes on. I met a guy the other day that asked me if sea turtles have gills. So, I think it is important just to like understand the basic stuff that most of your dive guides during, fun dives will inform you about.
Yeah.
So, you can't go into conservation not knowing if sea turtles have lungs or gills. So, that's the first step. And I think after that, there's so much people in the conservation world that is willing to teach people everything they know. But again, everybody has different opinions. Everybody has something else to teach. Some people have conflicting views on certain things. So networking is really important. Asking the right questions, really important. And there's nothing like a dumb question, like that cliche. Ask questions as much as you can.
Except turtles.
Except as but at least he asked the question. Otherwise, he would have probably died not knowing. And I think that is actually scarier than asking the question. So, I think ask as many questions as you can. And, something that I consider really important when it comes to actually learning anything in life, in work, whatever you do, is, when somebody teaches you something, take that knowledge, take that information, and go do your own research. Go try and find out, prove that point to yourself. Because it's very easy to just, hear something from someone and be like, oh, that's a fact. And that's not always the case. Yeah. So I think, it's very important if people do teach you something, always listen to different opinions and go do the research, draw up your own opinion. I think that's pretty important when it comes to things like conservation, because you look at like coral restoration work at the moment, there's so many conflicting views to like what's right, what's wrong, what works, what doesn't work. So, if you want to be completely sure, go do your own research, sit behind books. If it's something you're really interested in, you won't mind sitting for hours trying to figure out what coral this is, what coral that is. So I think own research, really important. And then, finding out what you're passionate about. It's one of my best friends, Spencer Arnold. He's an incredible nudibranch specialist and scientist. This guy is just absolutely obsessed with nudibranchs. He's the nudie nerd of nudie nerds. He does some incredible research projects, but again, he found his niche. He found what he's passionate about, and he actually told me the other day something that's, which is true, something that you hear a lot, but, it's like if you're really passionate about something, it doesn't feel like you need to study it. Yeah. It happens because you're so intrigued and you're so interested, like he says he still doesn't feel like he knows enough. That makes me feel stupid because when he starts with these Latin names and stuff, nudibranchs, it's incredible to see someone that passionate. So I think, when you like ease into the conservation world, it's going to be very broad, You're going to learn ecology about certain areas and all this. It's very basic, but it gives you a good base understanding. And then from there on, branch off into what you find most intriguing, because conservation should be fun. It's not something, it shouldn't be a job. Again, I can talk about conservation and my own opinions on it. I just think since I'm a conservation diver instructor as well, most people that I teach, I know they're going to go back home and gradually they're just going to fade out of the conservation world. But, let's say 2 or 3 of those 10 people that you've taught, they'll continue on that journey, and they will teach another 3 people. And, it's just there's basically this pyramid scheme of conservation that does take time.
Yeah.
But you do find people that's just, absolutely passionate about asking questions. And I think asking questions about the ocean is sometimes a little bit frustrating because, it's not just like, oh, well, we'll spend a week and we'll find out. It is years and years of failures. And so I think, it's a really exciting environment to work in.
Well, I want to thank you very much for being a part of the podcast today, and I look forward to see what you have going on in the future, and I will definitely stay in touch.
100%, and thank you again. We dived together for the last few days. We've had some absolute incredible dives. So,
molas, so.
thanks for your presence on the dive boat, and just your presence all around. It was always a good time hanging out.
It, man.
And
Thank you very
we'll
much.
definitely see each other again soon.
Offgassing, a scuba podcast.